Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Excellent. Well, let's get started. Hello and welcome to the new office. What should we expect? My name is Stephen Huerta. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Workify, an all-in-one employee feedback platform. Today's the first of 4 fireside chats that will examine a topic that's a huge area of focus right now, returning to the office. And over the last few weeks, we've seen a huge spike in our survey activities as companies are eagerly wanting to know how their employees feel on this topic. Today, I'm really excited about our guest. She will offer us a unique perspective on this topic. It's going to be a great discussion. Given that the topic today is really at the nexus of her expertise as a business and her personal experience as CEO, I think we're going to have a really great conversation. I'll introduce Beth shortly, but first, let's take a look at our discussion topics. And before I jump into the webinar today, just some logistics. We're going to spend about 35 to 40 minutes, speaking through the topic today, and we're going to save as much time as we can for Q&A at the end, hopefully about 20 minutes. So get your great questions ready to go. My colleague CJ is going to be manning the chat line, so please submit your questions along the way. And again, we will save as much time as we can because I know you're going to want to get some of Beth's perspective on what you're struggling with, what you're working through. But first, let's take a broader macro look. And in preparation for this session today, I found some really interesting numbers that I wanted to share with you all. At the end of March, 94% of the U.S. population was under stay-at-home order, and that's it feels so long ago, but so recent. But to think that 94% of the U.S. population was essentially locked down, and here we are, 2.5 months later, more than 35 states have reopened or are partially reopened. But the reality is many businesses are still at the crossroads for how they're going to move forward. On the other side of the equation, we have the employee perspective. And here's some interesting tidbits from our data. As recent as 2 to 3 weeks ago, our data was showing that almost 2/3, 2 out of 3 American workers feel uncomfortable about returning to the office. And nearly half don't expect to be back in the office before August, to give you an idea of the timeline that's in the minds of employees. So here we are. Employees are wanting clarity. They're wanting answers. There's still a lot of factors that are up in the air. And quite honestly, as a business owner myself, it's hard to provide clear guidance on exactly what's going to happen. So today, in this the first episode of our Fireside Chat series, we're going to look at the new office, how it's evolving, how it's going to change. We're also going to examine how leadership teams are balancing a variety of competing priorities. I mean, these are some difficult decisions that are being made when you talk about working through what was a full shutdown and now moving into a situation where there are a lot of anxieties and concerns around. And so our goal today is to share lessons learned. We want to talk about some of the successes that we're seeing with our clients and some of the leaders that Beth's working with. We want to look forward. We want to discuss trends that are popping up in employee feedback and pulse data. As usual, we'll share with you some of the things that we see with our clients and what's going on in the results that we're finding. And really the key theme today is balance. How do you balance the needs of your business with employee concerns and get to an outcome that makes sense for the culture of your business and really leaves your employees feeling safe and secure? I said earlier that we're going to be manning the Q&A lines, and I just wanted to send additionally remind you that's the most important part of this dialogue is really your questions. So with that said, let me introduce to you our guest, and I'm really excited about today's guest. We have Beth Goff McMillan, the Chief Executive Officer at SKG Texas. Beth, how are you doing today?
I am dandy. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. And
Good.
to give you all an idea of Beth's background, she is an advocate and steward for the furnishings industry. The work that her business does really elevates the experience of connecting organizations with their employees in the work. As a woman owned and managed firm, SKG provides a unique workplace consultative strategy while providing leading products and services to their clients. SKG works with a variety of organizations ranging from corporate to healthcare, higher
Mhm,
education, and hospitality.
mhm,
So, really excited about having Beth. And mainly for two unique perspectives that you bring, Beth. I'm really excited to have you share with our audience some of the changes that are happening in the workplace. And as a leader, I admire you. I enjoy every conversation we've had, and I'm really excited about opening that up to our audience. So first, Beth, tell us a little bit more about the core business at SKG.
I think you framed it up really well. And our business is kind of tricky um, to get your head around. The most simplistic way um, in answering that is we are a research-based solution provider for space. So what we do is we lead with a strong consultative platform and research base. We try to connect the business to the employees through the real estate model.
Mm.
So for us to really achieve our clients' primary goals, we need to get inside and really understand the functions of that business, where the business is heading, who their customer base is, and then we align their goals with how the office actually functions. How do we get engagement and productivity out of employees? How do we make it an inviting space for visitors and guests, especially if you think about the education and the healthcare world? And then there's this huge piece of well-being that is really infused. So yes, at the end of the day, we provide services and solutions, but it's how we get there that is really at the core of what we do.
So it sounds like you're having a lot of these conversations. The topic of today's chat
Just,
with leaders
just
and your clients.
yeah,
Well,
constant. Mm-hmm.
well, I'm looking forward for you to share some of this with our group today. Should we get started? Should we jump in?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, we first start with the macro level, and at Workify, we immediately moved into the remote working model.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, we were chatting about this earlier, Beth. We haven't looked back. We've actually made the decision to be 100% remote working company. We are software as a service. We're in the tech industry, and there are pioneers that were already doing this. And so personally, as a leader, I haven't spent a ton of time exploring what a move back into the office would look like, but our clients have, and we've worked with them to get employee feedback on the topic. And through all of that, we've heard a lot of rumors of new requirements for in terms of changes to how office space can be leveraged, how common areas will need to adapt. I've even heard about things like sneeze guards and one-way hallways, which was a surprise to me. And so, the first statement we want to examine today is, the physical office will never be the same again. What are your thoughts on that comment, that statement?
I think it's completely accurate, but I don't think it has to be as dramatic as how people are approaching kind of a prescriptive model based on what other people are doing. I don't think the office will ever look the same again, and that's okay. If you look back at the evolution of the office, in some of the earliest images at the turn of the 1900s, and there were 1920s, 30s, there were secretarial poles, and everybody had ashtrays on their desks, and it was a completely open work environment. And then slowly there was privacy, and then we, by the 80s, we had the Dilbert cubicle with panels that were taller than a human, and then it went all the way back to no panels. And then even as 4 or 5 months ago, every article was, is the open office too open?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing this dramatic shift of either I'm not coming back, or if I come back, I'm coming back in a hazmat suit and in a glass bubble. And so I do think we are working with 8 to 10 weeks of data points.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very hard to make sound business decisions when, as leaders, we don't have muscle memory.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have a ton of data points to rely upon to say, hey, how did we handle that situation? But I do think as it relates to the physical environment, absolutely it's going to look and feel differently as it relates to health and safety,
Mm-hmm.
as well as it relates to engagement, employee engagement and collaboration. That will look differently, not only from a physical standpoint, but also from a technology standpoint.
Hmm.
But I think the office is even more relevant than before COVID. And so many, we do, obviously, in working with you guys, we do a host of surveys, both to our customer base, to the public, as well as internally. And in every single survey, it is resounding at a like 90 to 95% rate that the number one thing people miss are their coworkers. They miss the people, they miss the culture.
Connection.
That's why people want to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting, as you're sharing, and I'm a little bit older, and I remember the latter part of that evolution, going from pure offices to cubes. And it's just funny how things do, it's cyclical. And but man, what a catalyst for change this is. The interesting thing is the commitment to the office, that statement in itself. One of the things that I saw in preparing for this session was a headline that Apple had made a statement communicating that they are returning to the office 100%. And which is a stark contrast to what all of the other Bay Area, what Google, Facebook, Twitter announced that they're likely to not come back. And so, I think that was just an interesting, I guess, dichotomy. And what's your reaction to that?
I think we have to take a step back and put in perspective of who those companies are, what they do, and where they do it in relationship to what it is that we all do, where we reside, and the work and engagement that our individual businesses do. Again, I think it's very difficult to take a prescription of a massive global technology company and think that's right for you. And I think the hardest part is, as a leader, you have to be crystal clear on the message of what your business is and what are the goals of the business, where are we going, how are we getting there. And for us, the workplace is vital to what it is that we do. We are an innovative, fast-paced, high-energy business. We're very team focused. The workplace for us is essential to driving that. If you look to the counter side, we don't develop software. Well, I don't have thousands of coders that are on a global platform. And I'm also dealing, we provide services, products and services coast to coast. So we're nationally based. I, as a leader and as an organization, this is the first time I have had to deal with a pandemic. A lot of other countries, this is normal. There are many parts of the world that a pandemic to them is more normalized as a tornado would be to Oklahoma. We know how to handle hurricanes, tornadoes. We have building codes. We have all these things, where in some countries an earthquake or tornado is devastating. Yep. So when you look at some of these large global companies, their infrastructure, their disaster recovery plan is going to be very different than a small local, regional, or even a national company. So what might work for Twitter, what might work for Google or Facebook, probably is not going to work for me.
Right.
And the other side to this is you have to think about the talent pool.
Mm.
When one, and if you think about, you know, all the Apples, the Twitters, the Facebooks, the Googles, they're all competing for a talent pool that when one shoe drops, they all follow suit because they're all feeding out of that same pool and they're competing for that. I'm not competing for, you know, coding and engineers that would want to work at a Facebook versus working for SKG in Austin.
That's a great point. And so what I'm hearing, Beth, is a couple of things. I'm hearing that there's really that this is really going to come down figuring out a return to office or what the new normal looks like is really going to be specific to your business. There's no one size fits all approach.
You know, even yesterday, I had a great conversation with one of the world's largest energy providers. Mm-hmm. And 30% of all gasoline is consumed by consumers. They couldn't wait to get their 10,000 employees back to the office because they want people utilizing gasoline. And as we ended the call, he said, Beth, get out and drive as much as you can. And so I think, you know, and they are global. And they have, can you imagine an energy provider? They have disaster recovery protocols that I couldn't even fathom. But that's the business that they're in. Their mantra is all about smart, sustainable energy use. But nonetheless, part of who they are is and he said it very, very clearly that the CEO said, we are a work from work business.
Interesting.
And the employees rallied around that. And like, you're right, that this is what we do for a business. So I think it really is what is right for the business. How is the leadership team communicating that? And then what is the business continuity plan that supports it?
Well, and that's the second thing that I'm taking away is that the I guess process that you're going to use to work through the ultimate decision is going to be based on, you know, things like your size, your geography, where you do business. And so with that, I think that's a good segue into the next discussion point, which is, you know, to return or not to return. What factors, you know, should we be considering in determining a return to office? And earlier, you know, we just talked about some of the factors that you mentioned. What are other things that should be determined? And you know, how are you seeing you know, leaders work through this in a systematic way?
You know, I think this, you know, you hear people talk about this in a couple different veins, either a business continuity, disaster recovery. For us, we were already in the plans of what would happen. We were more afraid of, you know, what happens if our entire server goes down or we can't access information. You know, we weren't thinking about a global pandemic, but we were in the plans of what business continuity looks like. And so if you start with a basic framework and a decision-making protocol, where you know, I took the team through 5 clear steps of, for us, how do we immediately protect our employees? We are very much an employee-centric business. So how do we protect our employees? How do we defend our position and defend our customers? How do we look at this from a financial aspect of how do we preserve, reserve, long-term strategy, long-term planning, and what is going to stand in the way of that? And for us, it's kind of, we have to bring people together to execute projects. And then on the backside of that is how do we pivot and go on the offense? And then lastly, what's the boomerang effect? How do you plan for this, but then plan, oops, what if we become a hotspot and we have to go back to shelter in place? You know, what if one of the steps didn't work out? You know, what happens? So we start with a basic framework. And then for us, we have some guiding principles. And when you think about the strategic planning, some of the most important things that you can do is think about who is in the room, who's not in the room, when you have to make tough decisions. And already knowing this is who we are as a business, these are our core principles. And for us, we are very much employee-led, employees first, that we kept coming back to what is right for the business, our employees. And as we made that, we were very systematic in having the people in the room that needed to be there and making sure people that didn't need to be in the room, we didn't have them in there. So we can make hard and fast decisions and keep the momentum of the business going.
And so in doing that, Beth, how do you bring in, because, it's, the strategic process of the framework you outline, which I think is great. How do you bring in, this broader perspective of the employees, the concerns? You mentioned gathering feedback. How have you seen that brought into the conversation?
It is a huge piece. And, thank God for Brene Brown talking about vulnerability everywhere. This is, you know what, and I am very, very grateful. She doesn't know that we're best friends, by the way.
I think she has a lot of best friends.
Stalker at this point, but I gave the entire leadership team last fall Dare to Lead. And we were already working on these exercises about leading with vulnerability. I mean, we had already been working on that, and there's never been a better time to hone those skills for us in order for us to plan for truly, I mean, these could be life-threatening situations. I mean, keep in mind, we're in the space business. We didn't sign up to, run ops in the military or perform surgery in an operating room. I mean, we were working a strategy for a workplace, but now we're having to plan for truly life and death situations, and people they're scared. Yeah. They're afraid they're going to take something home to their elderly parents, their children. And it went from people having control over their day, their week, their month. They had their schedule. Kids went to school. I leave for work. I do this. I go home. The kids have soccer. There was a schedule. And all of a sudden, everything that we knew was gone. There was no schedule. There was no food. There are no sports. I'm now homeschooling. I'm working. I'm worried, am I going to have a job? Is my husband going to have a job? Is my partner going to have a job? It went from having clarity and control to having utter chaos.
Oh, absolutely. If we look at this from a hierarchy of needs perspective, I'm sure you may be familiar with the pyramids, right? And at the very base of the pyramid, you have the basic needs. And,
right.
From time to time, one of those basic needs may be at risk. And that creates, a problem, right? Disengagement as an employee, as a human being. And in this situation, as you just kind of walked us through, almost all of the basic needs have been put at risk, and it's been a major disrupting factor just in a matter of weeks. And so yeah, we in our data, one of the questions we ask is, please, which one of the following feelings best describes where you are in the current situation. And nervous and anxious are the two top trending feelings. And this is kind of from the feelings wheel that our IO psychologists help bring incorporate into our surveys. And so it's just, there's a lot of data on our side to support exactly what you're walking us through. And so now you have this data. How are you seeing, how do you bring this into the ultimate, you're showing empathy, compassion, and, you're having tough conversations. How do you continue doing that? I think as a leader, sometimes it gets scary to continue having those conversations, particularly when you don't have answers. What has been your experience there?
And I think that what you just said is huge. And that is at the heart of it being a vulnerable leader. We spoke to our staff, and as I watch and talk with other leaders locally, nationally, the ones that are getting it right are those that are communicating often, communicating clearly, and sometimes it's I don't know. And a lot of times we'll say, as of right now, as of June 10th at 12:24, this is the latest information. This we might have to pivot and shift in 24 hours. I mean, there for a while, I mean, it was literally almost hourly, things were changing. That there are many times we didn't have the answers. And I think when we were communicating and when the team, when they would ask a question and, you know, they're asking right now, Beth, what are we going to look like 6 months from now? I don't know. I can tell you what we look like now. I can tell you what we're planning for in 30 days, but I can tell you how we operate in 30 and 45 days is not how we're going to be operating in December. I don't know what that looks like, but here's the opportunity. You're going to have part of that. You're going to be part of this process because we continually keep that dialogue going of here's our plan. And then we test it and we survey, we engage, and how is the plan working? If everybody is anxious, how can you work if you're worried about your paycheck? You know, it's hard to bring your best, and we're all about bringing our best to work every day so we can bring our best to our customers. It's hard to do that if they are anxious and nervous because they're not hearing
100%.
from you.
Yeah, 100%. And so what I'm hearing is it's not so much the details of what you're communicating or a definitive timeline for returning to office. It's that you're continuing to listen to your people, that you're being transparent, and you're letting them know that, you know, decisions are being made, and, you know, we're going to move as quickly as we can, but really keeping up the cadence of getting in front of employees to rebuild some of that trust, given so much has changed on their side.
That's right. And, you know, sometimes there's almost that piece when you're talking with somebody and they have all the answers and they know everything, they come off looking like Slick Willie. But when you are engaging and are like, gosh, we're planning for it, but I don't know, but I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to share the plan with you. It gives them the sense that, okay, whew, they're thinking about it. They don't know everything. And sometimes there's a lot of belief and trust in just saying, I don't know, but as soon as I do, I'm gonna share it with you.
Yeah, and that can have a powerful impact. Before we move on, how do you, you know, one of the things with this major shift, you know, in this working from home kind of experiment, right? Because we essentially, you know, we're forced into a working from home arrangement, whether employers wanted to do that or not. You know,
Right.
there is kind of a cost equation there. You know, how do you see that factoring into the decisions that are being made?
The cost equation about returning or not returning to site.
Exactly.
You know, for us, it's not about a frontline cost. It is more, how do you want to use the workspace? If you think about the sheer cost of your employees and the overhead of your physical work environment, those are the two most expensive things that a company is going to have. So to me, it's not about the frontline costs of them individually. It's how am I leveraging this space as a strategic business tool for the employees to engage with their work?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we have to start is where do we get, it's not just about baseline productivity, it's about how do we continue to engage in innovation and collaboration. And Walter Isaacson said, especially with the Steve Jobs book that he did, innovation comes through collaboration. And so many times, yes, we're collaborating right now. We're talking, we're having a dialogue, but it's very different than when you're in a war room with whiteboards and you all are developing or you're thinking about a new vertical market. There's an energy that comes when you're feeding off of each other. That's why so many marketing companies have always been open office. It's all about that energy, and that energy is contagious, and innovation comes from that dialogue around a table, and that's hard to do on Zoom. And that's where I feel as a business, yes, our teams can be productive heads down, but we leverage our workspace as a collaborative environment to drive innovation and bring the best to our customers.
Well, yeah, so that brings us to an interesting place. So now we've talked about how companies have to find what works for them. We've
Mhm.
talked about there being a role that the physical office will continue to play, and
Right.
I do agree with that. Regardless of the decisions we're making, do you think something in between is the going to be the emerging model? So somewhat of a hybrid approach. Do you think that that's a viable option? Do you think, or do you think it will create operational confusion?
I think I think some of the best companies are going to find the hybrid. And this is where we're seeing opportunity for our own growth. And I'm watching companies out of all of this pain and chaos, those that are seizing this opportunity to be innovative are rethinking how they work. And for us, I'm not worried as much about that individual heads down space. I now know that our teams can be productive, but we've always been a slightly distributed workforce. We have people all across the country. So we were used to teamsing, doing Teams calls and Zoom calls. We were used to that. But there was this centric feeling of being in the showroom, being in the office. Now that the entire company can see that you don't have to show up to be working, a lot of those, that underlying cultural stream of if you're not in the office, you must be, out paddleboarding. Like that has subsided. Now everybody can work at home. So for us, when I think about the use of our space, I'm not as concerned about that heads down focused work.
Yeah.
I know they can do that at home. But what I am worried about is how can I safely bring people together to train, to onboard, to collaborate, to innovate. That's where my head is at. We literally walked our floor earlier today, not because we're wanting to buy anything, and we sell furniture, but it's how are we going to reuse the assets that we have to drive what everybody wants. People want to come back and be together and work, but then I want to pack my stuff up, go home, and then execute. So I think there is a hybrid in terms of what is going to be right to not only drive productivity and drive top line revenues, but how are we going to still drive our culture and our sense of community?
Well, yeah, and I completely subscribe to the belief or the perspective on this. This really is an opportunity to completely reimagine the
Mm-hmm.
workplace. And
Mm-hmm.
I do. We also at Workify we agree that the winners are going to be the companies that lean into that and start to challenge all the old assumptions around talent. We spoke a lot about talent
Mm-hmm.
in our meeting yesterday, Beth, in preparing for
Yeah.
this, and you shared some really interesting thoughts about how this change will not only the situation and the business transformation we're going through will not only impact the office, quote unquote office, but it
Right.
will also it's challenged some really old assumptions like you just walked us through. Like I remember the belief that individuals working from home, there's no way that they could be productive.
Right.
In our
Right.
Workify survey data for years, if you looked at millennial, Gen Z data, there was always, that was the number one burning topic for them. And so there was
Right.
like this generational divide between, the old school, guys like me, Gen
Bernard.
X and boomers who believed you have to be in the office to be productive. And
Right.
the I guess younger generations who thrive and knew that they could do the work if they were just given a chance from doing it from home. And so that's what we're seeing. And since we've all had to work from home, I think those that were skeptical, the skeptics have now. I think that's been put to rest. We can be productive, and so this notion that okay, well, maybe we're going to be part remote working, and the moments that matter most for culture building and for collaboration, that's going to be the time which those are going to be the moments that we're leveraging physical workspace. I agree that there is something that there's something magical about being located. That's why offsites are typically done in physical buildings,
Right.
because there is this magic, this powerful energy that's
Mhm.
created when you're in a room whiteboarding and having really kind of candid conversations with
Mhm.
relentless focus. And so I think the end result, to get back to my point, is this could create new opportunities from a talent acquisition standpoint. And so
Absolutely.
share your perspectives on how this could change the way that we source talent, and possibly would enable us to look at talent we normally wouldn't look at.
This is such a huge opportunity for everybody. If you have had to hire in Austin, Texas over the past 4 years, I mean, it is a race of the fittest. I mean, it's it is a completely got out of control, and to a point that we couldn't find talent. We were our salary caps. I mean, it felt like I was trying to manage an NBA team with a salary cap. You can only get this many people, and it became just unbelievable. In our teams, we would say, let's look outside of Austin, and our teams were adamant, like, no, we want them here. We want to have them here in our office. And now everybody's like, oh, okay, now I get it. We can work and not physically be together 8 to 5 days a week. So now our lens has opened up outside of Austin, and we've tapped in already to some really star talent that doesn't even reside in Texas. So from a leadership and for everybody, management, even if you're out looking for a job, the world really is your oyster now. And we are looking coast to coast. We're not separating the piles of, well, are they in Central Texas or are they outside of Texas? Doesn't matter. We can now leverage that.
Omaha, Nebraska, that candidate
totally.
out, wherever, that had a pretty sick resume, but just had a physical, boundary in place like that now is can be put into question. And so I think that's great. What what do you think some of the challenges will be getting back to the hybrid approach? Are there any other challenges that you're considering, for your clients, for your own business, outside of, how do you dictate, how do you reorganize charters? How do you prioritize time in one place or the other? Is there any other thoughts that you have around that challenge?
I think this is going to be, this is a great question and a multi-pronged answer. And we actually have some information I'm happy to share as we've looked at the research on this. This is going to be phased. And the first thing that everybody has to get their arms around right now in the immediate is health and safety. And how do you safely roll people back and test the health and safety protocols? That is something that a lot of, I would say the majority of businesses have not had to plan for. I mean, unless you're in the healthcare or you're in a specific line of work that would require that a lot of our policies we've had to adapt, and we had to get our work from home policy. We had one established, but we had to modify it. We now have assets all over the country now. We were a mobile workforce, but not to this degree, where people are like, I need a table, I need a chair, I need dual monitors. Now there's so much stuff that we're trying to reconcile. Well, what do we keep in our physical office versus deployment? So it's all these policies and procedures that we're having to fine tune. But right now, they're all around health and safety, onboarding, getting people back in, getting them comfortable. Then I think it'll happen again. Then what does the new normal look like? Is wearing a mask going to be the new normal? Is, social distancing going to be our new normal? And so I think you could answer that in a lot of different ways depending on where you're at in your own evolution. And inside of each one of those, a little bit more macro topics are all these little micro decisions that have to be made that will impact what does your reception really look like, because are you having to take somebody's temperature?
Yeah, and I'm just looking at some notes here, and we have one of our clients, international client in a highly regulated industry, and they in their COVID-19 return to office survey, they asked a question. We have clear regulations and requirements that government authorities are enforcing. What are you prepared to follow the regulatory guidelines? And the percent positive on that, strongly agree, is 98%. They asked a follow-up question, please respond to the following statement. I feel as though I can effectively wear a face mask and do my job effectively. They only had 52% percent positive that could actually happen. And so that just goes to show, like, there's a delta of 40% where there are regulations and requirements of having to follow certain guidelines, as you were just saying, from a safety, health and safety perspective. But this corollary feeling that you're not able to. And so that kind of takes us to, I'm getting fed. CJ's feeding me the first question from the audience. How do you get a better understanding of what the requirements are from a legislative perspective and compliance standpoint?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do, and in Texas it's a little trickier, you have to first start with what are your state regulations, and you can search those. We actually post them. If you are in Texas, if you go to skgtexas.com, we have a COVID-19 orange banner at the top. We actually call out what Governor Abbott put as we reopen. Here are the criteria. The criteria is actually very loose, but it is set up if you are a restaurant, if you are an office, if you are a landlord. So depending on what category you're in, governors will tell you what the state regulations are. City and local and state officials can provide different regulations. So you really have to understand both, and then understand if you're an essential business. We tried to break that down for everybody. We have spent, well, every single week since this has started, on global webinars and calls and in conversations with officials as well as our customers that are dealing with this, and we've tried to distill that. But start with what the government regulations are, the state, the local government agencies are regulating. You can Google any of those for wherever you're located, and you start there. That becomes your baseline.
Got it. Next question here. What is the most frequent change that you have seen in terms of how we need to adapt the physical workspace?
Social distancing. The one thing that we are seeing all companies do is provide adequate social distancing, whether it's in the kind of your workstation area, whether it's in your conference rooms or training rooms. What we're seeing, how we're solving for that is based on the size and the 6-foot diameter, we're removing chairs. And if a conference room used to fit 8 people, we've left 9 chairs in there. So, and we've placed them to where only 9 people can fit in there. And that is the most common practice that we're seeing is in cafeterias, training rooms, break rooms. Are we providing enough social distancing? And are we providing enough hand sanitation, whether they're wipes in high use places in your cafeteria? Are they by the coffee machine? I mean, everybody now has the fancy, I'm going to push my 12 buttons to get my cafe au lait. So are there wipes around the microwave? So hand sanitation, wipes, and social distancing, it's more than one, but those are the ones that we're seeing that everyone that is going back on site are planning for.
And are you seeing companies making these changes in a more organic way, or are they being are they advertising the changes and some of the requirements? I know some of the I'm guessing some of this will be up to the discretion of businesses in the industry and the location. But how have you seen that? Like, is there a stance to take on how proactive should we be in terms of I guess educating our employees that are returning to office on these changes?
We're seeing more people be completely outward. We actually on our website post our health and safety protocol, and we did that so people could learn from us. We also share it because we have delivered installation crews that are physically going into someone else's space. We put out there that what all of our protocol and procedures are to ensure that as our teams show up, they're showing up in the healthiest way possible. So we have we're a little bit more complex because we not only work together, we have customers come in and want to visit us. We also have to go out and engage. So we post ours out publicly. A lot of companies are doing that. You have to prepare the employees for what it's going to be like when they return. And if you have guests that you're going to allow, you have to tell them what to prepare for. We actually have an outward bound survey. If somebody says, Beth, we want to come in, we'd love to have a dialogue and a conversation about furniture, whatever. We actually send them a survey that it's a short one, but they fill it out and we tell them when you arrive, we're going to take your temperature. You need to wear a mask. Wow. Can't wait to have you in. But that is to protect them. That's to protect our employees. But we actually do put that out to educate our employees and our customers what to expect. And then if they're not comfortable with it, they don't have to come in.
Awesome. That's all good feedback. So my next question is a personal question for me. Earlier, you mentioned that you're seeing companies take this in phases, and earlier I shared that the economy is essentially reopened, and I know that is a generalization because there's still some states that are partially reopened. But are you seeing a general timeline emerge, either for overall or for the phases that you mentioned earlier? Like any kind of insight that you can provide there in terms of what?
Absolutely. We're seeing a lot of companies test with a really small 25% phase. Okay. And they're doing that now. A lot of companies are saying, hey, we're going to take June to roll back 25% of our working population. And that is to test the protocols, the procedures, and to also give a comfort level to the other 75% that it's working, that there aren't these radical spikes in any new cases, et cetera. We're seeing a lot of companies not bringing back more. If they're bringing anybody back, they're not bringing more than 25% until after Labor Day. A lot of people are utilizing the summer. There are so many camps. I mean, if you think about the big picture, there are so many camps that are canceled and daycares that aren't open and all the school activities. I mean, summer just looks different now. And that's an additional stress that now I have kids in the home that just want to sit on their devices. Yeah. So internally, we have that conversation a lot where they'll say, I need from 1 to 4 to go be with my kids. When they go to bed, I'm going to finish my work. I cannot just have them sit and play, the Wii all day. So a lot of companies are waiting till after Labor Day to see what happens with school, whether it's going to be homeschool or learning on site. I think that will then pivot the next marginal increase.
And so it sounds like summer is really being used as kind of an initial test to see how a move back into the physical office, get an initial wave of feedback. Could be a good time to do a survey to your employees and see how
100%.
feeling from a safety standpoint, getting some data back, and then looking after Labor Day at a next phase of moving back to the next wave of employees going back to the office.
Absolutely.
We have another audience question here. Do you think that the 6-foot diameter space will be effective long term? Is it worth the financial investment to come up with permanent solutions that allow for employees to come to work without breaching that 6-foot regulation? Great question. So we have part financial. Does it make sense to incur those costs? And what is really, from my perspective, what is the practicality of implementing said solutions on a permanent basis?
I think it's still a little too early to tell how long the 6-foot diameter will be in play. I would think until there's a vaccine. But then I think if we look at the top 3 things that are keeping people healthy, is wearing a mask, washing your hands, and social distancing. CDC, those are the 3 continual things that say, if you want to stay healthy, start with these 3. We are cautioning all of our clients, and I'm saying this from the perspective of we sell stuff. We're telling them, hold on, don't make large capital investments right now until you see how it is you're going to work. What we're encouraging is that everybody leverage their assets that they currently have if you're in a position to do that. Some companies kind of had bare bones infrastructure and they don't have a lot to maneuver and position and create barriers. But if you have a lot of furniture assets, we're suggesting that you can reconfigure, redesign them in a way that can set up for social distancing and allow for still some teamwork to occur. But we're planning as a business and with a lot of our large users that 6-foot diameter is here to stay for 6 to 9 months, or until that we feel that it's more about safety than regulation. The 6-foot diameter.
Got it. And you bring up another off the cuff question from me. You mentioned masks as a deterrent, and I'm just curious, what sort of trends are you seeing in the workplace? In the data that we have, the notion of a mask and having to wear a mask is somewhat of a polarizing topic. We see that employees are having really extreme kind of responses to questions related to masks. And I'm just curious, has that factored into any of the conversations that you all are having with clients or specific to your return to office?
Yeah, that you are absolutely right. Large debates going on about masks. What the common rule of thumb that we're seeing is that while maneuvering through the workplace, you have to wear a mask. If you're getting up and walking to the copier, walking to a cafe, especially on an elevator, you are trapped in a metal tube, wear a mask. But sitting at your personal desk, sitting like right now, I'm sitting in the office, I shut the door, I'm not wearing my mask. So once you're kind of seated, it's kind of like a restaurant. Most restaurants are saying, wear a mask to keep our employees safe. When you get to your table, take your mask off. And that's kind of what we've adopted, and what we're seeing a lot of businesses adopt is that we want the employees wearing a mask while they're going through common floors, while they're transitioning through elevator banks or stairwells. Then once they're seated, take the mask off. But while we're engaging and walking, that's where we're trying to protect each other.
Wow. Well, I think that's great kind of guiding feedback. There's so many other questions. Sorry if we didn't get to your question. our apologies, but we're right at the time now where we start to wrap up the session. Are there any kind of closing thoughts, Beth, that you want to, if you were to boil all the perspectives that you've shared into, a couple of nuggets, what would you leave our audience with?
Well, number one, feel free to reach out to us. This is complex. This is confusing. It changes. It's like planning in quicksand. Leverage our website. We put so many tools out there for people to learn from. We're very, very passionate about what we do. So reach out to us, ask us your questions. We're happy to help you. But I think if everybody, with most things in life, if you can step back and realign the vision and the plan, and then the process will follow. But if we lead with what is right for our business and our employees, the right planning and structure will come from that. And I always, doesn't matter if I'm talking to my teenagers or with customers, you have to do what's right for your business for it to work. A beanbag in a law firm doesn't work. So don't follow prescriptions, don't follow gimmicks. And I would also caution on spending large amounts of capital around promotions and things. Masks, cleaning supplies, absolutely. But for other large purchases, I would caution until you know a plan. Once you know a plan and you feel like it's going to be right for the business, then execute it. But that would be my leaving thoughts are just align the business goals and the strategy before you make a swap decision that we're not coming back or we're not going to do this. Just make sure it aligns.
And to bolt onto that, my parting words, obviously I'm biased, but I want to just encourage all of you to continue to gather employee feedback. Beth hit on this several times. It's such a important source of where your employees' heads are at, what they, where their tolerance, what the tolerance is for returning or not returning, what the return should look like, their major concerns. And while you're not going to make decisions based on all the feedback, there's never been a more important time to gather that feedback and have conversations with your people. So we hope the chat today was useful to you all, and we hope it helps you in finding balance in your future work return to office strategy. I want to thank Beth again. Such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. And as we mentioned earlier, we will send our COVID-19 pulse survey templates, which now include a return to office template, as well as links to the white papers that provide a wealth of information on what a physical return to office would look like from Beth and SKG. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to go ahead and close the session. Thank you all.